Yeah, so the big thing that I'm going to be talking about today is a lot about what you've already heard, but I'm just going to summarize that, and then we'll have a great discussion here to end this stage off. So the new era of constructability is obviously what I'm going to be talking about. Just a little bit about myself. I am from the U.S., dealt with a lot of different projects all the way from $1 million to $200 million. About 10 years in the industry and participate in a lot of different universities. The company I work for is a regional contractor out of the U.S., based in the South in North Carolina. We're about 74 years old. We'll celebrate 75 next year. And we're kind of unique. We're actually a horizontal and a vertical builder. Typically, you don't see both of those all encased into one. So we do vertical construction, site infrastructure, transportation, and asphalt. This is what everybody understands about where constructability is and where the industry is, right? The top 5 things, and the comment that we're always made is we always got at least 2 of the 3. It was either going to be on schedule, on time, it was going to have a cost, and then the quality. Now it's very hard to get one of those things, and clients more and more are trying to understand why that's happening. And there's a variety of reasons. But one of the things that we as an industry, especially as the GCs that drive that process, we have to fundamentally change the way that we produce constructability reviews, right? It's always been to a point where we were on 2D drawings, and now we got to take that to the next step and bring in the 3D environment even more. And that process of being successful with those top 5 challenges of project managers all leads to the pyramid that you see there, and everyone in this stage and then in this space that we're in understands that this is the process of what it takes to be successful, and then hopefully at the end you can celebrate those achievements and cut the blue ribbon. So what is constructability? It's a pretty straightforward term for most of you here in the stage, but more broad to the industry is how buildable is it? And it's just a technique that's used to be able to look at a process in pre-construction and work its way all the way until we get to construction, and then it turns into coordination. And what we've done over the years, in the last 10, 15 years, is we've used the model in the coordination predominantly. But what we've got to do is we've got to really start to do what everybody else has talked about and bring that more into the pre-construction aspects as the new technology progresses. And the idea is to identify these different aspects. How much is it going to cost? What delays could we foresee happening? And then where's the overruns or quality going to suffer? The projects are getting more complicated. These are 2 projects that I was a part of in North Carolina, and we'll talk about others throughout the presentation. One of them is a parallelogram. So it's a very weird structure. It's got some unique ideas beside it, because if anybody understands what a parallelogram is, if it falls one way or another, it actually gets at the stability of the structure can get out of whack. And that's what's interesting about this structure, is that it's a really beautiful glass structure, but if you do something on one side of it, you got to do it on the other. It's completely imbalanced in how that works. And there's only so many in the world that look like this. The other one is kind of unique. It was a project that we were working on that was for a DNA company, and they wanted to construct something that looked like a DNA strand. That's pretty hard to do, and so trying to work through those processes of does this make sense for the company? Are you trying to use this as an architectural feature, and is the end use what you wanted to see? And what we see in this process of constructability is this long, drawn out. It's broke up into different stages depending upon how contracts are made. And really what it comes down to there's a point in which constructability meets its max value. And we all know that it has to happen when those 2 lines meet, quality and time. And when we get into construction, it's then the coordination. And it's kind of an afterthought at that point because the process is going so fast. So in the front end of this, as we're working through this massive ordeal of all these different people that are involved in this process, that constructability aspect is very important. And it is really focused on the right-hand side of the page. But what we have to get across to the massive industry that we are in is that it incorporates the way that we're going to build the building as well, and use that model not just for coordination practices within it, but also to use it for estimating, to use it for scheduling, to use it for logistics and how we're going to physically build the building. Because in the world we live in, we have always fell into this process that the model is static, but we're building a dynamic world. So that's not something that we need to continue. We need to take that and incorporate all these different concepts together. Put that model of what it was always meant to be in the center of this whole process, right? And yes, there is things that we have to get better on for every single part of the circle, right? The circle is what we do every single day as a GC. We have to look at the expectations of what the owner is providing us through the lens of the designer and work through those processes through design. With that, as we've talked about, fabrication and logistics and 4D and scheduling costs are all important while we're in the process of building the building. But what if we could start that a little bit sooner in that process? And then finally, as we talked about, other stages are talked about today, digital twin is going to be a major part of operation and maintenance in the future. So why not talk about that at the very, very beginning of a project versus waiting until we get involved in it? And in the States, it's become a really big issue. And to the point that a lot of state representatives across North Carolina and other states have said that GCs are failing at constructability reviews. We don't have the right people in place to do it. We don't have the time to work on that. So those are the things that kind of is frustrating, right? If we don't take the time up front, then we're going to get really messed up at the back end of it. And it involves two different pieces. We have an aging workforce that is going to leave us in a very, very short period of time. And we have a young workforce that's eager to join us, but they don't understand where they fit in to that industry. And so with those two perspectives, we have to look at it by bringing them along to get them to a point where they can take over for the next group. And that's all, just as we staff projects and with the experience that we have, we need to staff constructability reviews at the front end a lot better with experience and with new talent. With being able to do that, you could take the ability of completeness and assign that to somebody that's brand new in the industry, right? Because in this process, they're learning the ways of what we do every single day. And then on the back end, you have the person that has the 35 years, the 40 years of experience. And you allow them to analyze the building components and bring the completeness together to complete a constructability review more effectively. The other thing is scope of works. We have this problem in the industry where we kind of say, all right, pre-con, you're good to go. Here's the estimate, and now operations, go build it and scope the job. But yet again, now with the advent of all this technology that we have, why don't we scope the job all the way back while we're doing the constructability reviews? We're already doing value engineering, terrible term for designers, but at the end of the day, that's the point of what we're trying to get at. And then finally is the back checking. So we do all this work on the front end, but then we don't go back before we actually sign contract to get started, and we need to back check that work. One of the guys in the US that I'm really fond of is Jason G. Smith. It's a great book if you guys are really interested in this topic, and he created a company called Construction Analysis and Planning LLC, and he developed 5 basic rules that we use every day, right? But we're not focusing in on them enough to be successful. So first is, build the project. Don't focus solely on the problems. We have a huge issue in this industry of blaming designers, and we can do it all day, right? I mean, they don't have enough time to complete their task. We don't have enough time to complete our tasks. So why are we blaming them for the same process that they're having an issue with? The other thing is we solely focus on the problem at hand, but the project is what's important. How do we build each of these different things becomes the soul of what that building is going to become, and don't assign blame. The next thing is review the interface of various systems. And it's not just the MEP systems, it's the systems of envelopes. One of the biggest challenges we're seeing just in the last presentation. These envelopes that are being developed by architects and being pushed by clients to have a beautiful building, they're getting more and more complex. So just because you have a system that we've been ingrained into us to look at, here's an issue, try to solve it, we need to look at the big picture and how it interfaces together using the model. Keep the review of the documents constructive, we always have this ability to look at drawings as they work their way through the different stages, but we're also looking at it too soon. And there's definite definitions for each of those different stages that they're required to meet. Now, we can talk all day about changing those, but at the end of the day, that is what they're responsible for, and we're trying to drive that process. Stay focused on important items. We're trying to look at in constructability, is this going to impact cost? Is this going to impact how long it's going to take us to build it? Or are they going to get the quality that we need? And then finally, take the time to complete a thorough review. It can't be more stress. And this is something that we have to drive to an owner. Yes, you have a project that you want in 2 years, but if we take an extra few weeks on the front end of this job, it could mean an extra couple months at the back end of this project if we do this successfully. And if we do it successfully, the data is there. There's tons of studies. McKinsey does a great one just a few years ago where they found that if the constructability review changed just slightly from what it was, how more valuable it would be to the project as a whole. But right now, currently, if it's done correctly, the cost of the project, is less, 4.3%, they say. It reduces the schedule by about 8%. So you can see the different types of things that if we could start to break away these different things, we could really get to a point where we can help the industry move forward. But how do we do that with where we're at? We still have this the idea in most countries, especially in the US, that the model is not a contract document. It drives us crazy. It just is where we're at. In Europe and other countries, it is a contract document, and there's more methodology behind it. But where we're at, we still have to take what we currently have and just make it more collaborative. So with the people that are out there that are still into the 2D drawings because that's the contractual agreement for this, why don't make it more collaborative by taking the 2D plan flip and just bringing that into a collaborative environment like Procore, and taking that information and use the completeness from the people that are just starting in the industry. Go through a checklist of exactly what should be in the drawings, if it's complete or not complete, and really try to understand from your employees, do they know what they're reviewing? So that's a great check on the industry as a whole for the younger generation. And then for the older group that's there to drive it forward, you take that information and you combine that in a collaborative environment and still do a 2D review. There's still a point in which we have to move from one to the other, and that's what's in process right now. The other thing, like I was saying earlier, logistics. Let's stop looking at logistics just in a 2D environment. Let's look at it and take the resources that we would typically do during coordination and bring that into an environment where you can actually take it and logistically plan it in a 3D environment that's shareable to the team. That's a product that we're using now. It's called CM Builder. It's just been in the last few years that they developed it. But you can see just from the basics of it, it gives you that overall idea of what you're trying to do, and then it gives you the resources to plan crane placement. It gives you the ability to understand how the environment is going to be impacted. On the next front is the 5D. Take that information that you see within the model and tie that back into our traditional takeoff processes, but incorporate that and let pre-con understand the building that's being estimated. Another piece of the puzzle that we always forget is that the issue with BIM in the past is it always was static, but we're building in a dynamic environment on sites. So why don't we include that? Hexagon with their product of AgTech allows you to do that. You can look at it in a regular takeoff scenario, but you're able to then take that information that has been created in that and pull it into the BIM environment and use that to look at how the site interacts with the project. And that is looking at the site as a whole with dirt moving back and forth, or looking at it with utilities and how the utilities are going to generally impact the project. So with taking all this information, we can put it together in a product like Revistu, and you have a full-blown collaboration of all these different things. And that's on the reality capture front, that's on the laser scanning front, that is on the underground utility engineering, which is known as SU. And you can then take that process from a constructability aspect, and you can then be prepared better for coordination. And with the advent of 360 photos and other techniques, you can then start to track the progress. But this is where we're at today. The next goal of it is to take this and do inspections and to make it a more dynamic process. It's more of a static process, and we're leading to a dynamic process. So how do we go to a more dynamic process? Well, the advent of Evercam and what they're doing with AI and the ability to take the information that you've planned in that static environment. And let's not look at it from just static pictures, but what if you could take the construction camera that we all know and we've used in the past as a generic time-lapse camera, and why can't we take that into a dynamic environment by tracking the schedule using that concept? So this is a great example of that same project that took all those different pieces from the different aspects that I've talked about, and now we put that into an environment that now we're tracking progress over time. And we're starting to go from constructability into coordination. And this is just a generic example of the plan versus actual. The actual is the construction camera that is being tracked, and it's constantly being done because the camera is taking those pictures. And on the other side of it, you have the model that you've developed, and you've tied that with your schedule. The other aspect of this that I think is really fascinating is where can it go from here? One of the big things is delays, whether it be delays in terms of weather-related problems that cause issues. This can track that and determine if you can claim those days. And that's a big thing in the industry as a whole, whether it's also with different aspects of theft on a job site or just how production of a job site works. Concrete pours and tracking that over time of how much time it takes for a truck to go from one step to another. And finally, you take that process as a whole, and you take the 2D and the 3D, and you can then start to look at the procurement of a project, so that by the time you get through all these different things and you figured out how you're going to build the project, you create what we're all going for. And this is the connective environment that every stage is talking about. Taking it from constructability of design to the built environment of logistics and construction, and then finally with the digital twin with the handover to create the connected BIM. That's my final thoughts on this. If you noticed, we have a very nice venue in the middle of the arena where I'll be talking about a lot of these different topics from the stage on the BIM Hero podcast. Thank you, guys.